Story 1. I am incredibly grateful to live in a country with preferential voting, where you number your preferred candidates from 1 to 6. This system allows you to support a minority party and send a message, but if they do not receive enough votes, your second choice is counted. I appreciate that our opposition leader gave a gracious concession speech, accepting the results and offering kind words about the Prime Minister, including that his deceased mother would be proud. I am thankful for our universal healthcare system and for the candidate who won tonight. While he is not perfect and has his faults, he is determined to reject the American-style paid healthcare, expensive medications, and exorbitant hospital bills. He aims to expand and improve the free services provided while subsidizing the paid aspects. Signed, a grateful Australian. Story 2. Dutton's political career is ending in a blaze of glory, not only by losing the federal election for the Liberal Party but also his own seat to the Labour Party. Story 3. Geelong defeated Collingwood in a landslide victory for the Australian Labour Party, and Dutton lost his seat. It was a great night. Story 4. Relief. I was actually impressed with the speeches by Penny Wong and Anthony Albanese. They came across very strongly. I have not paid attention to Albanese, our Prime Minister, for the past 3 years, but I will be paying attention now. Story 5. I was a little worried leading into it, but I had a great day watching the coverage on our ABC. I will miss Anthony Green's election analysis, as he has been the best in the business. He pretty much called it 2 hours into counting, so it has been a wonderful night. Anthony Albanese's speech was great, and I loved seeing Peter Dutton lose his seat finally. Story 6. Great. It looks like my electorate, once a liberal stronghold, is going to change to a sensible progressive independent as well. Story 7. Absolutely fantastic. I am so glad that Trump is gone and I no longer have to look at his face anymore. Story 8. I feel like it is a thunderous indictment that Australians have no patience for right-wing schemes and cultural conflicts. Story 9. I feel great. However, this is bittersweet for many Australians. The cost of living crisis does not magically disappear just because the same party is in power. What is most important is that we enjoy a victory and continue working towards making our country a better place for everyone. Story 10. Relief. The winners are not going to make us do more than tread water, but the opposition is about to attach anchors to our feet. The conditions are not going to change. Renters will continue to face challenges, and climate change action will remain minimal at best. However, at least they are not anti-science, anti-welfare, or supporters of culture wars for big business. Story 11. I am American but have lived here for 15 years. All I can say is that I am thankful some people have more sense than those back home. Story 12. I am pleased. I was not completely caught by surprise. The largest voting bloc in this election was the Millennial and Generation Z bloc, which leans more left than in the United States. In the 2 debates featuring live audiences, the clear winner among undecided voters was Albanese. Story 13. I'm Canadian and I've been reading about the Australian election. It's uncanny how our 2 countries mirror each other with high housing costs, conservative success, shifts towards the left, and both conservative leaders losing their seats. Go Australia. Story 14. A sense of elation and relief. I was impressed with Albanese's speech and even Dutton's. It was the first time I saw him show some real humanity. I am glad to see the Liberals get defeated and their right-wing ideologies soundly rejected for now. I just hope Labour can truly deliver on their promised policies. Story 15. I wish there were more independent voices to bring change. A minority government would not have been the worst outcome. However, I am very pleased that the Labour Party triumphed over the Liberal Party. Story 16. Does anyone think that the results of the Australian and Canadian elections signal a wider turning point in the world? There was a lot of analysis during the Trump campaign and after his win about how it was part of the growing international anti-left sentiment, nationalism, populism, and the embrace of strong leaders. The United States was not the only country swinging in this direction. Is it possible that Trump has so poisoned the brand of such movements that we will see a backlash against them in other countries? Story 17. Dutton promised a government similar to that of Donald Trump. Australia rejected that idea. Dutton's party lost the election, and he lost his seat. This reflects the sound reasoning of the Australian people. Story 18. Brilliant. Our Prime Minister emphasized that we are not the United States. This is the biggest win for the left since the country was established, and we can thank Donald Trump for much of that. Story 19. Feeling good. These are challenging times worldwide. However, this government is in the best position to assist people in need and lift everyone. Story 20. Relieved and grateful that common sense prevailed. Identity politicians and aspiring proponents of radical right ideologies have no place here. Story 21. Fantastic. Dutton is gone. I would have preferred a larger gain for the Greens to give them more power in the Senate, but I will happily take what we have. Story 22. The result is that I feel good. Australians have sent an important message to the government and the world about the nature of our core values. This is reassuring and a source of pride for me. I had to tell my child that something significant has happened that has never occurred before, and he might see some adults behaving in a somewhat silly way in the coming weeks. There are many strong emotions that will be expressed. I am bracing for impact. Story 23. Hoping Albo wins because Dutton is just greedy. Albo, in my opinion, has personality and prioritizes the Australian people, while Dutton is focused on cutting down as many free services as possible to fund his nuclear energy vision. I do not disagree with the idea of switching to nuclear energy, but considering how long the process takes, how much it would cost, and its impact on the current cost of living, it does not seem like the right time to implement such an expensive plan. Story 24. I felt grateful last night before bed that I could sleep soundly knowing I could safely cast my vote today without coercion or concern. I was thankful to arrive at the polls with only one person ahead of me, which was nice. I may not be a fan of labor politics, but I am truly thankful that as a nation we definitively rejected divisive nationalism and hate-based politics. Story 25. Still waiting. I believe the Labour Party will win. They align more with my interests this time among the major parties. I think they will gain popularity with the younger voter base increasing. I also believe the Green Party will become more popular, although I find some of their policies somewhat idealistic. Story 26. Relief. Hopefully, the Liberal Party lost so significantly that they will need to rethink everything and come to their senses. Story 27. A really positive result for all of Australia. I am happy to have steady leadership for the next few years. Let's see what happens elsewhere. Story 28. In typical American fashion, I want to share my unsolicited opinions. I am very grateful for what Canada and Australia just did. Stay away from this negativity. Fascism must be eradicated. Do not allow it into your homes. Story 29. I am so relieved, but we must remain watchful. We cannot sit back and let the right-wing movement creep back in. We need to stay vigilant. Story 30. Australians may not consider themselves the smartest people, but they can confidently say they are smarter than the United States and most of Europe at this time, as those regions seem to be falling for fascist rhetoric. Story 31. Grateful, relieved, and proud, even a little hopeful. Albanese and his party may not be perfect, but the alternative would have been devastating. Story 32. Here are the similarities with Canada, a right-leaning party known for echoing Trump talking points, and likely a potential Trump ally, was leading in the polls until months ago. Both countries have experienced cost of living crises, fueling a right-leaning protest vote. Both incumbent leaders have faced criticism for policies related to carbon targets. Following Trump's second presidency, voters in both countries rapidly shifted toward the center-left candidate, citing national and economic security concerns. What did I miss? Story 33. Relief. I know I am not living with individuals who lack understanding. I live with people who still believe we are all in this together. Phew. Story 34. The hardest thing about the election is that there will no longer be Anthony Green. The man is a living legend. For those outside Australia, he is Australia's premier psephologist, someone who studies elections, and this was his last election providing analysis and commentary. He was completely respected across the political spectrum for being objective, thorough, insightful, and having no personal political agenda. For many people, it didn't matter who tried to call the election first. It wasn't decided until Anthony Green called it. At the end of the night's election coverage, they had a video farewell card for him with messages from every surviving Australian Prime Minister, except one, from both major parties. He was one of those people whom everyone respected because he was exceptionally skilled at his job. For example, in the middle of the election coverage tonight, the computer system feeding him data and predictions went down. He couldn't pull up figures or drive the large color displays that everyone loves these days. No sweat. He jumped on the Australian Electoral Commission's website and started analyzing the data live. Anthony, you will be missed. Story 35. It's not a perfect result. I'm a big fan of minority government, but given that the worst-case scenario was likely to be a supporter of Trump, I'm thrilled. Story 36. I am quite pleased but still concerned about the large majority held by the Australian Labor Party. I would have preferred to see a hung parliament favoring the Australian Labor Party, but we can only wish. I am pleased that our country is not succumbing to the chaotic right-wing politics we observe in other places. Story 37. Over the moon. The chef's kiss was Trump losing his own seat. The Labor Party has the people's best interests, not billionaires. Story 38. Couldn't be prouder. The Dutton proposal was defeated. We didn't need his nonsense. I mean, the man had a void of charisma. He was quite possibly the most unlikable man in Australia, promoting foreign policies to appeal to certain groups. It's not surprising he lost, but after Trump existing for the last 100 days, I think many of us were worried. I know people whose retirement savings suffered under Trump's policies, and more would have suffered had Dutton been elected. Most of all, it feels like a nationwide rejection of Gina Rinehart, who had Dutton's support for the last 3 years. When even the media empire couldn't make him look good, he had significant shortcomings. Story 39. A few months ago, the Conservative Party was in the lead. Then Trump did what he usually does, and support for conservative politics quickly diminished around the globe. We are glad to have been a part of it. Story 40. I couldn't have asked for better. I entered the election assuming we would make the worst possible decision, and to my great surprise and pleasure, I was wrong. This is a clear rejection of the right and its current culture war fears. I genuinely hope that the Liberals reflect on this loss and consider the words of their spokesman on the panel. Do not interpret this loss as a reason to shift further to the right. Return to the center where the party belongs and reject the voices that will, in the coming days and months, call for moving even further out. Story 41. At about an 8 out of 10. A minority government would have been better, and the Greens not only maintaining their seats but gaining would have made it a 10. Still pretty pleased, all things considered. Story 42. I am relieved that the coalition is not in power. We dodged a bullet there. However, I am concerned about the lack of new independents or smaller parties. The Labour Party is not as bad as the coalition, but they do not seem to have any policies that will address the housing or cost of living crises, and their performance on environmental issues is also lacking. I am grateful we are not in the worst timeline, but I still do not see much hope for improvement. Story 43. I'm just glad we don't have a year of the government blaming the previous administration for all the mistakes they have to fix. Straight back to work. I hope. Story 44. Labour is the first party in nearly 100 years to improve its election results from the previous election. The opposition leader lost his seat. We hope to have a healthy crossbench. This is the best possible election result I could have imagined. Story 45. With luck, it's such a vigorous repudiation of the drift to the far right that it may finally turn the lights on in both the Liberal and Labour houses. For the Liberals, stop chasing the extremists in a continuous rightward surge like the one that has taken the Republicans well into the realm of authoritarianism, fascism adjacent, and looking over a low fence to full-on fascism seasoned by oligarchy and Christianist theocracy. Return to being center-right where you belong. For Labour, stop chasing the Liberals down their descent into the right-wing abyss, becoming a center-right party in hopes of attracting their disaffected moderates. Go back to your natural home as a center-left party, and stop fighting with your actual left-wing neighbors, the Greens. Have a more cordial chat where you have common ground. And grow some backbone and stand up to the miners, the oil and gas producers, and actually tax them for the national resources they are making billions from. It's not like they can get them somewhere else. Fight back against their manipulation in the compliant media instead of running scared. The electorate is generally more sympathetic and slightly better informed these days, and you should focus on that instead of admitting defeat. On that subject, how about some media reform with substance? Create regulations covering truth in advertising, penalties for misinformation, and independent bodies for monitoring and enforcement with actual power to do so. On welfare reform, instead of saying, "We can't afford it," when looking at benefits below the poverty line, have the moral courage to say, "It's necessary that we commit to this," and then find a way to afford it. Get the order of priorities right. Decide that, while national security is important, keeping people fed, housed, healthy, and educated is a more pressing concern. Perhaps if some billions were reclaimed from purchasing almost certainly non-existent submarines from the United States, along with the previously mentioned taxes on those looting our mineral resources, it might enable you to pay pensions that allow for more than just survival, alleviating the constant anxiety of choosing between food, medicine, or homelessness. Regarding homelessness, get serious about building affordable social housing. It has been well demonstrated overseas that it is more cost-effective to provide housing for the homeless than to address the health and social side effects of homelessness. And that little green and gold card flashed with pride. Yes, Medicare is one of the best things labor ever did for us. Now finish the job. Bring dental care on board. Review the benefit levels paid to reduce out-of-pocket expenses. Put more funding into public health services. As for how to fund it, adopt the methods used by Scandinavians and Europeans. Tax the miners and oil and gas producers. Prepare detailed costings and, if necessary, recover more through the income tax system and other revenue streams. Do the hard work and communicate the benefits to the electorate to justify the costs. You may find that those of us who can afford a bit more will be willing to contribute for the benefit of society, particularly if we can see and understand the need and benefit. While I could go on at length, I suppose I need to take a breath at some point. I'm sure people get my point. We have given this new government a solid mandate to make things better. So it's about time they show the courage and vision to take meaningful steps to do so. Story 46. Congratulations on being a sensible Commonwealth cousin, Australia. It's a relief to see fascism being driven back. Story 47. I am pleased that the Liberals faced significant losses. It is unfortunate that the Greens performed poorly. Max Chandler contributed a great deal to the community during his term, only to lose his position. It appears that Adam Bant will retain his seat in Melbourne, though it is quite close. The Senate results remain uncertain, but if the Labour Party chooses to be cautious, there may not be much political momentum for progressive initiatives. Story 48. I am relieved the Liberal National Party didn't gain power and indulged in some satisfaction at Dutton losing his seat. That was a good time. It was interesting to watch the results from Tasmania come through. They really swung a lot this time. As a supporter of the Greens and the Victorian Socialists, I am disappointed and saddened by the loss of 2 Queensland Senate seats, especially that of Max Chandler. I am a big fan of his stance on renters' rights, community care, and integrity. It looks like the Wills seat is still in contention, so I am hopeful that Samantha Ratnam may yet achieve a victory there. In any case, it was a huge swing. I am very left-leaning, and while what I consider to be the lesser of 2 evils retained power, I am disappointed that the Australian Labor Party will take their majority as an endorsement and continue their status quo. I was hoping for an Australian Labor Party minority government with the Greens and Independents holding the balance of power. Among other things, I am at odds with the Australian Labor Party on Palestine, the AUKUS agreement, new coal projects, negative gearing, stronger protection for renters, and including dental and mental health services in Medicare, along with mutual obligations and welfare being below the poverty line. So, I am glad we do not have more Liberal National Party influence, but I am not entirely thrilled with what we have ended up with. Story 49. Australia rejects Trump-like politics. I am not happy because my team won. I am happy because, for the first time in a long time, I am proud to be Australian. Story 50. I am glad that the Fascist Party has failed to gain seats and has actually lost a significant number. However, I would have preferred a larger shift towards genuinely progressive parties like the Greens, rather than everyone simply voting for the centrist party, which does not offer much in terms of progressive policies. Reviewing the vote tally and percentage changes from the last election, it appears that most generally right-wing parties have lost voters, except those running on a platform of pure racism, which have seen an increase in voter support. Story 51. I am very happy that the negative, hateful, and distrustful side of politics has been significantly diminished. Story 52. I thank Trump for showing us what populist authoritarianism truly represents. It sounds good at first, but until you see it in action, you don't fully appreciate how wrong it is. We were fortunate to learn from the mistakes of other countries. Story 53. These results were a dream come true, but it will be interesting to see how our former left-wing, now center-right majority party uses their victory. To any Americans observing this result and thinking, Australia sounds great, maybe I'll move there, you should realize that your left wing is our right wing. Please do not bring your American politics here. This election was heavily influenced by our growing weariness of extreme sports team politics, and an entire dynastic political party was just eliminated for aligning with your cultural conflicts. Story 54. It's sad. Really? I couldn't vote for Peter Dutton or the Liberal National Party because of their policies, but the Labour Party has been lackluster on the cost of living. I'm a detail-oriented person, so I keep a strict budget. Over the last 3 years, my expenses have increased by over 40%, while my income has only risen by 9%. I've had to give up on my hobbies. I just hope this convinces the Liberal National Party to return to the center. Story 55. I am relieved and very happy, but I am also a bit concerned about the future. A good democracy needs a strong opposition, but no other parties or independents meet the mark. However, I suppose that is for another day. Today is just about happiness. Story 56. Most impressive overall is that our country is still largely unified and democracy is in good shape. Despite the usual childish behavior of politicians during the campaign, when it mattered, Dutton spoke well in defeat, and Albanese called out some supporters speaking poorly of Dutton. Regardless of the politics, we should never take democracy for granted, and I thought in the end both leaders made that a priority, and for that I am very happy. Story 57. I would prefer the government to focus on the economy and housing crisis. The problem is that Labour is already the least unfavorable among the major parties. The other contender was frankly unviable. Story 58. Aussie living in America, I am incredibly relieved. I have been filled with anxiety for months, and I am feeling very relieved today. He is not perfect, but at least he is not Dutton. I hope he does the right thing for the country and the people. Story 59. Honestly, this was a good second choice, but I am still very disappointed by the Greens losing seats in both houses. They remain the largest of the minor parties, receiving over 13% of first preference votes, but they face challenges with Liberal National Party preferences going to Labour instead. With a Labour majority, Anthony Albanese will not be progressive enough to effectively address the issues at hand. He needs the Greens to push him to the left for any of his plans to come close to resolving the cost of living and housing crises. Story 60. I am overseas and only received my postal vote yesterday since I had been traveling. The first thing I did was pay for express postage to get it shipped out as soon as possible. 24 hours later, we have the result. I could not be more pleased with the outcome. Story 61. Do the election results not indicate how Australians feel about the election? What has happened to our education system? Story 62. I am disappointed that the Greens are losing some seats and that it is not a minority government, but overall, the election result is a net positive. I prefer this outcome over a disastrous Dutton-led Liberal National Party majority. Story 63. Honestly, it feels like peeking through the Iron Curtain to witness the collapse of the Berlin Wall. Something is changing in the world, and major Western powerhouses are beginning to mobilize against the onslaught of selfishness and greed from unchecked billionaires. I am proud to be an Australian today. Story 64. It's a slap across the face instead of being repeatedly reeled in the negotiations. Labour is far better than Liberals, but I would have liked the Greens to hold the balance of power. Story 65. I am an American expat who became a dual citizen just a few months ago. I am extremely happy. I will admit to being a political enthusiast. I live in a strongly conservative area, and I admire Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong for their friendship and the progress they have made. Story 66. I am relieved that Dutton was defeated, and we won't follow the United States into their culture war issues. I am disappointed that the Labour Party received so many votes, as this will encourage them to continue their complacent approach and do little to address the issues facing our country. This leaves the door open for a more competent authoritarian leader to take advantage of the situation. I am devastated that the only party committed to protecting our resource wealth and supporting struggling individuals has lost seats. Story 67. Great. I was expecting a liberal defeat, but to lose by such a landslide feels like a true rejection of the right-wing tactics he was flaunting. Dutton losing his seat on top of that was the icing on the cake. Story 68. I feel positive about it. It represents a rejection of Trump's style of conservatism by Australian voters, and that is certainly a good thing. Story 69. I'm glad we completely shut down the American-style rhetoric. I would have liked a Labour minority to send a proper message that the public is hurting regarding healthcare, housing, and the cost of living. Story 70. Feeling great. I am pleased that my seat supported the independent incumbent over the right-wing candidate, and that the further right-wing individuals did nothing. The self-proclaimed patriots can go away after the unsolicited text messages. Story 71. Happy Dutton lost his seat, and we won't have to hear from him again. I would have liked to see a message sent to the Labour Party that their performance has been poor, especially considering how quickly they yielded to the gambling lobby. However, with a significant swing, they won't see anything wrong with it. The slightly less unfavorable option won. There was no good option available. Story 72. Happy about the Labour Party winning. I am disappointed that the Greens lost ground, but I do not believe that this reflects an anti-Green sentiment. Rather, it seems to be an anti-Dutton vote, with voters supporting Labour to ensure that Dutton does not maintain his position. I am also pleased that Dutton is no longer in his seat. Let's move forward for another 3 years. Story 73. It's great to see a resounding rejection of divisive politics and a coherent, respectful acceptance of defeat. This certainly demonstrates that politics doesn't have to be the negative spectacle currently on display in the United States. Story 74. I am disappointed. I hoped the primary vote would shift away from the major parties again. I am surprised the Greens seem to have retained only one seat. Story 75. Absolutely thrilled. This was a clear rejection of conservative politics with multiple firsts and records set. Peter Dutton is the first federal opposition leader to lose their own seat, and he lost it to a single mother with a disability. This is the lowest first preference vote count for the coalition in history. The Liberal Party holds no seats at all in Tasmania or metropolitan Adelaide. The Australian Labor Party is looking to secure well over 55% of the two-party preferred vote for the first time since 1935. The seat of Sturt in South Australia has been claimed by Labour for the first time in over 50 years, and they did it comfortably. Up until a couple of months ago, this election was looking like a landslide for the coalition. But instead, they were decisively defeated, and rightly so. I'm disappointed to not see more Green candidates elected and to not see Senator Penny Wong, but for an election that really could have gone the other way, I'm thrilled with the outcome. Story 76. As an Australian citizen, I believe that political parties like the Liberal National Party should understand that importing divisive rhetoric and behavior from other countries will not be accepted in Australia. Current events indicate that former President Trump is facing significant challenges in his own country, so it is perplexing that some would attempt to align themselves with him. It is essential to recognize and reject any connections to harmful ideologies or individuals known for promoting racist and offensive behavior. Story 77. I am pleased that my preferred candidate won in my electorate, ecstatic that the former representative lost his seat, and hopeful that we may get a better opposition party from this, although I have my doubts. Story 78. Us Americans reading this thread feel like Squidward watching from the window as SpongeBob and Patrick play outside. Story 79. I am pleased with the results in Australia, and I appreciate your support from Canada in rejecting the extreme political movements. The fear of what is happening in the United States has generated a wave of democratic patriotism. And in Canada, we experienced the highest voter turnout in years. Story 80, feel great. A supporter of Trump is out, and we can get back to some type of normal life. We don't need negativity here. Story 81, it feels like a wash, honestly. Neither major party is going to address the significant structural issues in the Australian economy or take steps to protect and enhance our civil rights. Australians will become poorer, our cities will become more crowded and less safe, and our ability to voice concerns will be further limited. The path forward appears to be one of continued decline. Story 82, not really pleased. We tried hard to keep Dutton out, but we ended up undermining the Greens. There is no one to keep them in check now. Story 83. I'm happy this went as I hoped, and for that, I'm grateful. If we could see the demographic spread, a lot of young people voted for the Republican Party, and I think it has a lot to do with the campaigning of outlets like Cheek Media. Story 84. I can't wait for nothing to change again until the next election, where nothing improves once more. Story 85. This wasn't really a Labour win as much as a significant loss for the Liberal Party. I wish the swing had gone to another party instead of Labour. Story 86. Do Australians have a first-past-the-post system or a proportional representation system? Here in Canada, we have a first-past-the-post system which, along with other factors, has led to strategic voting. This resulted in significant losses for the left-wing party, the New Democratic Party. How did Australia's smaller parties perform? Story 87. I am not surprised that Labour won, but I am surprised by the size of the victory and that Dutton lost. The Greens have also seen a significant decline, and in my seat, McNamara, there was clearly tactical voting to ensure they did not win. Last time, Labour was second with the Greens closely behind in third. Whoever came second was going to win. This time, Labour was well ahead. Story 88. Over the moon. The Brumbies defeated our old rival, the Waratahs, in rugby. Labour won and Dutton lost his seat. That's a trifecta for the ages. Story 89. Relieved. Watching the division and divisive politics in the United States is pretty scary, and some of it does bleed over here. You'll find Australians online who think Trump is great and want that attitude here. So you never really know how an election is going to go in these times. I'm very relieved that a majority of Australians saw what was happening and were just like, no thanks. Honestly, the Liberal campaign was truly terrible. Dutton started out trying some Trump-style policies like reducing federal workers and forcing a return to the office, then had to backtrack when it didn't land well. It earned him the name Temu Trump, and it was just all downhill from the beginning. A very indecisive campaign where he couldn't quite decide how much to mimic Trump. Also, I'm from Victoria, and he has such contempt for us as a state last election, this election, and during COVID-19. He constantly claims that we Melburnians are too scared to go out for dinner because of crime from immigrants. It's simply not true and is just insulting. Nothing is more annoying than someone constantly telling you how you feel when you've never felt that way at all. Story 90. As a disabled public servant whose job hinges on working from home, I cannot fully express how proud I am of my colleagues. Even though my electorate tends to lean liberal, there has been a significant shift toward Labour, which surprises me. I worked during the 2022 election, and it was clear within an hour that the outcome would favor the Liberal Party based on the votes. Story 91. Honestly, my feeling is that Dutton ran the worst campaign I've seen in a long time. I don't understand why he felt the need to aggravate civil servants. They are the largest employment group in the country, so logically, they are also the largest voting group. He didn't commit to any position or was overly willing to backpedal. Most importantly, even after realizing that Trump was politically toxic, he chose to continue supporting him for reasons I can't quite understand. Story 92. I must admit I was worried. I never thought Donald Trump would win the first time and was convinced no one would fall for it a second time. So when it came to our right-wing individuals, I didn't want to say there is no way he will win because stranger things have happened. I'm glad and relieved. Side note, it was extremely difficult to choose who to put last in our preferential voting system this year. We had One Nation, an openly racist party that wants Australia for white Australians only, Family First, which is a far-right religious party, and the brand new Trumpet of Patriots, which is associated with Donald Trump's party in Australia. Like a lot of countries, our major leftist party is the Australian Labor Party, and they are center-left but much more central than truly leftist. Story 93. I am extremely glad Dutton was kept out, but it feels like Labour and Albanese will feel emboldened by this and not address the urgent matter. Story 94. I am very happy. I was expecting a hung parliament, which could have led to a Labour-Greens alliance that might have been shaky. However, I was surprised to see the election called within 3 hours. That seemed faster than both the Canadian and US elections, and I thought the Australian election would continue until tomorrow. Additionally, Dutton being removed from his electorate was a nice bonus. I'm glad to share the same feelings my Canadian friends had earlier this week. Now excuse me while I celebrate. Cheers, everyone. Story 95. Massive shout out to Donald J. Trump. Right when things were getting tight, he returns to the headlines like a Florida man under the influence. So cheers, Donald. Keep doing your thing. It's making a significant impact on progressive politics everywhere except in America. Australia says thank you. Story 96. I feel a bit sad for the Greens, but I am happy with the overall results. I am relieved that people were not voting for the awful Trumpets for Patriots. Story 97. I am happy and proud of my fellow Australians who rejected the invitation to hate, envy, and create division. We are better than that. We knew it, but the leaders at the Liberal Party headquarters did not. Story 98. Surprised. I'm so glad the Liberals didn't win. I was expecting them to win because 2 to 3 weeks ago, the Labour Party was on track for a significant loss. I think this was a resounding rejection of Make America Great Again politics and pro-Trump politicians. Peter Dutton stated in 2016 that the future of conservative politics was culture war politics. And that's exactly what they did. They weaponized a national vote on Indigenous recognition in the Constitution and turned it into party politics. They attempted to mainstream slogans like, "Make Australia Great Again," with numerous winks and nudges to the worst elements of our society. They engaged in questionable preference deals with far-right minor parties and independent candidates. They organized for individuals from certain religious groups to overwhelm voting centers with Liberal Party volunteers and materials. Advance Australia, a far-right lobby group that has received support and funding from US evangelical Christian extremists, was backing the Liberals and pushing disinformation campaigns, such as the Greens' so-called death tax and inheritance tax. It was a remarkably dirty campaign, filled with an unusually high volume of lies and confusion in messaging to persuade voters to support the Conservatives. This result is proof that Australians reject this style of politics. We are not Americans. We do not want to be part of their country, and we seek the respect and appreciation that we have extended to Americans. That being said, the substantial victory of the Australian Labor Party is concerning. They are not particularly progressive and have consistently abandoned much-needed transformative politics and policies, bending the knee to neoliberalism. The current state of politics is troubling because those remaining in the Liberal Party are mostly entrenched fringe conservatives. Even as their loss began to unfold, members of their party claimed they lost because they were too left-wing. This issue is evident in my state, Victoria, where the Liberal Party has been stuck in opposition due to the presence of radical fringe elements. While I am staunchly left-wing, the state Labour Party has not been held accountable and has managed to evade scrutiny over dubious political actions, such as a major infrastructure project potentially involving funneling union funds to criminal organizations. This breakdown in our politics is not good for our future. While it is somewhat amusing and shocking, I would be lying if I said I wasn't enjoying the Conservatives' downfall because they have tried to harm my community for votes. However, it means we will no longer have a viable opposition party to hold the government accountable. This will be devastating for the quality of our politics, leading to worse outcomes for our country. Yes, we aren't a two-party system, but it is considerably more difficult for smaller parties and independents to thrive and deliver positive results for their electorates. The Australian Labor Party seems primarily focused on crushing them to dominate politics in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. Story 99. I am very relieved. I hope that the Labour Party accomplishes some effective work that benefits Australians. We urgently need to fix Medicare and restore proper bulk billing. I express this hope cautiously because it seems that many political parties around the world are shifting further to the right, adopting neoliberal policies and increasing privatization. Story 100. I just spent a couple of hours scrolling through the Labour Party's Instagram and TikTok for all the entertaining memes they used. Feels good. Story 101. I look forward to Andrew Hastie shaping the remaining elements of the Liberal Party into their final form. A self-righteous group pandering to a diminishing base of voters. I found myself captivated by the expression on Peter Credlin's face tonight. Story 102. Annoyed and worried for the next 3 years, Albo has done little to help this country in his last term. What makes people think he will do any better this time? Story 103. I'm grateful that we don't have Dutton as our Prime Minister, but I was hoping for a minority government. Story 104. We have an adult in charge. He has class and intelligence. He believes in standing up for the underdog. We are in good hands to deal with the current situation. Story 105. This was a mix of vindication, happiness, solidarity, and the biggest sigh of relief. This was an election like no other. It was Australia deciding, do we go down the Trump-like path or do we stand together and reject that approach? And what a night. A few important notes. The Australian Labor Party won a seat in South Australia that has been held by Conservatives since the 1970s. That seat has a mentality of, we all vote Liberal National Party around here because that's just what you do. Tasmania basically said no to the Liberals. The best, if not the cherry on top, was that Peter Dutton became the first opposition leader to lose his seat. Not only did Australia reject the Liberal National Party, but they also ousted Peter Dutton. He had held that seat for over 20 years, and Ollie France ran for the third time this election. His electorate said, goodbye, to the Liberal National Party and Peter Dutton. The result was a rejection of culture wars, hate, and division. Instead, it was an acceptance of a functioning, funded healthcare system and a functioning public education system with free technical and further education. To be honest, a lot of things won't change overnight, but this gives a progressive government a chance to implement and sustain policies that allow people to thrive in a society that cares about them. I'm hoping for a diverse Senate to ensure bills are properly debated and scrutinized. Story 106. This is a great result and a rejection of outright lies to win elections, such as the claim that nuclear power will deliver cheaper energy. Unfortunately, some may see this as a poisoned chalice as we enter a period of global instability not seen since World War II. While I am happy for this to be a significant signal to the rest of the world that the politics of hate does not always prevail, the people of Australia will need to remember this moment when challenges arise and push for real change in the system to make it more difficult for hate to return. Story 107. Not a single post shows support for the Liberal National Party or Peter Dutton. There is zero sympathy for the supporters of Donald Trump and News Corp. It is time for a royal commission into the right and their supporters and backers. It is time to halt all the lies and destruction and hold antisocial troublemakers accountable. Story 108. I am ecstatic. It feels like a rejection of American-style politics. I couldn't be happier. Even the Green Party faced criticism for trying out identity politics. We do not want it. Story 109. Great news. Not only did we reject fascism, but the opposition leader, affectionately known as Voldemort, lost his seat. Nazism has no authority in Australia. Story 110. Relief, but also some disappointment. I wanted a minority government. Now we will just get what the majority party wants unless our upper house can hold them accountable. Story 111. Mostly joy. Labour is far from perfect, but I will take them over the Liberal National Coalition 7 days a week and twice on Sundays. My hope is that their larger mandate means bolder reforms. I feel satisfaction that Dutton lost his seat. Story 112. I love my sunburnt country. We looked over the Great Pond and decided we didn't like what we saw. Then we stood in line together, and with a variety of opinions and experiences, expressed our grievances. We stood united against hatred and division. Together we turned and expressed our discontent. Then we enjoyed democracy sausages. Because we can. Thank you, Australia. Thank you. Story 113. I was pleased to see the far right faced consequences. I am a conservative by nature and am tired of extremists undermining my political beliefs. I simply want a fiscally responsible and non-intrusive government. I do not need or want mean-spirited bigotry and attacks on institutions. Hopefully, the coalition can learn from this and become a viable alternative for the public. Story 114. I prioritize the Greens and independent parties because I prioritize planet Earth, the environment, and the future instead of short-sighted and self-centered wants. Without a healthy planet, none of those short-term desires will amount to anything. Story 115. I am thrilled. Dutton losing his own seat was the icing on the cake. I come from a safe Liberal National Party electorate, and it is easy to think that those views are represented all across Australia, which can make one lose hope. I am very happy that as a nation we decided that the misleading tactics were no longer acceptable and sent that message loudly and clearly. Story 116. I was quite pleased, as I was getting worried that we might go too far to the right until Dutton and the other right-leaning parties began to undermine themselves. Labour reminds me of a green text story about Gabe Newell, the founder of Steam, that goes, "Does nothing. All your competitors shoot themselves in the foot." What is this business strategy called? I wouldn't mind seeing a few more of the further left-leaning parties gain some seats. I was particularly fond of some of Sustainable Australia's policies. Story 117. I feel like this was a significant victory for animal rights. I am very proud that the people of my country chose someone with strong moral standards who recognizes the ethical issues associated with live animal exports. I am proud that Western Australia, my home, shows respect for the person who visited us around 30 times, and I am glad he won by such a decisive margin, as it reflects the progressive direction the population desires, rather than a conservative one. Story 118. This was about the emerging quasi-Trump material. The local franchise is out of business, and the owners have lost their homes. Story 119. Relief and pride that, as a country, we told the Liberals to reject their harmful policies and try again next time. I truly hope they come back with some real policy and not just more of the same, so that the Labour Party is compelled to take action rather than be the default option for those who are not wealthy or discriminatory. Story 120. Yes, finally one for us. I supported Dutton. You are welcome to downvote me if you want, but now that we have this out of the way, I am ashamed at how my fellow countrymen can be so misguided. I'll be honest, I wouldn't have been too upset with a really tight race that took all night and into the next day to announce that Labour won. But this much of a blowout is shocking. Just shocking for everyone in this great land. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.